Imagine yourself in the ancient city of Ur of the Chaldees, a center of culture and commerce where gods of stone and wood were revered. In this scenario, Abraham appears, an ordinary man with an extraordinary call from God. God calls him to leave his homeland, promising him unimaginable blessings and a new home in Canaan. Thus begins a journey marked by unshakable faith and sacrifices that would test the limits of his humanity. This is not just one man's story. It is the beginning of a greater plan that would shape the history of humanity. Abraham lived in Ur, a prosperous land but marked by the worship of many gods. He and his wife Sarah had no children but shared a stable life. One day, God revealed himself to Abraham with a message that would change everything. Go from your country, from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. Genesis 12:1. The promise was grand. God declared that he would make Abraham a great nation, blessing him and making his name known. Without hesitation, Abraham obeyed. He left with Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all his possessions, following the road to Haran. There, they remained for some time, until Abraham received God's call again, ordering him to continue to Canaan. The journey was not only physical, but also spiritual. Abraham left behind his comfort zone, his security and traditions to follow an invisible God, unlike anything he knew. When he reached Shechem, God appeared again, reaffirming his promise. To your descendants I will give this land, Genesis 12:7. Abraham built an altar to the Lord, marking the beginning of an eternal covenant. Following God's direction, Abraham continued his journey through Canaan, but challenges soon arose. The promised land was not yet his, and Abraham had to deal with the reality of living as a foreigner among hostile peoples. He headed towards Bethel, and there he also built an altar to the Lord, calling on the name of God. His faith remained firm, even without seeing the immediate fulfillment of the promise. However, famine struck the region, forcing Abraham to descend to Egypt in search of sustenance. There, fearing for his life because of Sarah's beauty, Abraham asked her to introduce herself as his sister. Pharaoh, impressed by Sarah, welcomed her into his palace and bestowed riches on Abraham. But God intervened, sending plagues to Egypt, revealing the truth to Pharaoh, who then returned Sarah and ordered Abraham to leave Egypt. Despite Abraham's error, God remained faithful. Upon returning to Canaan, Abraham returned to Bethel, where he once again called on the Lord. Each altar erected represented a milestone in their spiritual journey, a testimony of faith in the midst of uncertainty and tribulations. Upon returning to Canaan, Abraham and Lot prospered so much that their flocks and wealth grew, generating conflicts between their shepherds. To preserve peace, Abraham proposed an amicable separation. Let there be no strife between me and you, nor between my shepherds and yours, for we are relatives. Choose for yourself whatever land you want. Genesis 13:8-9. Lot chose the fertile lands of the Jordan Valley, close to Sodom, while Abraham remained in the region of Canaan. After the separation, God reaffirmed his promises. Now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are. All the land that you see, I will give to you and to your descendants forever. Genesis 13:14-15. Abraham then settled in Hebron, where he built another altar to the Lord. But his journey of faith didn't stop there. When Lot was captured during an attack on Sodom, Abraham showed courage and loyalty. He gathered trained men and set out to rescue him, defeating the invading kings and recovering the looted goods. After the victory, Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek, king of Salem, who offered him bread and wine, recognizing Abraham as a servant of the Most High God. Despite all of God's promises, time passed, and Sarah remained sterile. Abraham began to question how it would be possible for his descendants to become a great nation. One silent night, God took Abraham out of the tent and said to him, "Look at the heavens and count the stars if you can count them. So shall your descendants be." Genesis 15:5. Abraham believed the word of God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. However, doubt still haunted his and Sarah's hearts. Determined to help fulfill the promise, Sarah suggested that Abraham have a son with her servant, Hagar. From this union, Ismael was born. Although Ishmael was a blessing, God made it clear that the promise would be fulfilled through a son of Sarah. Abraham now had to deal with the consequences of his decision, balancing his responsibility to Ishmael and his faith in God's plan. This situation further tested his confidence and patience. Ishmael's arrival brought both joy and tension to Abraham's household. Sarah began to feel resentful and vulnerable at the closeness between Hagar and Abraham. Hagar, in turn, began to feel superior after giving Abraham his long-awaited son. This conflict shook the harmony between everyone. Sarah, in a moment of frustration, asked Abraham to resolve the situation, saying, "My insult be upon you. I gave you my servant as a wife, and when she saw that she had conceived, she despised me." Genesis 16:5. Abraham, seeking to avoid further discord, allowed Sarah to treat Hagar as she saw fit. This led Hagar to flee into the desert, but God intervened. In the desert, an angel found Hagar and comforted her, telling her to return and submit to Sarah. The angel also announced that his son, Ishmael, would be the father of a great nation, but made it clear that he was not the heir of God's promise. This dynamic revealed human fragility and the complexity of the emotions involved, but it also reaffirmed God's purpose. Abraham had to learn to trust, even in the midst of domestic tensions. As the years passed, Abraham and Sarah grew older, and the promise seemed further and further away. Then God appeared to Abraham again, reaffirming his plan and establishing an eternal covenant. He changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of a multitude of nations, and Sarai's to Sarah, princess. God also instituted circumcision as a sign of this covenant, Genesis 17:5-10. Despite the renewal of the promise, Abraham still struggled to believe. When God stated that Sarah would give birth to a son, Abraham laughed to himself, saying, "Shall a son be born to a man 100 years old? And will Sarah conceive when she is 90 years old?" Genesis 17:17. Shortly thereafter, 3 heavenly visitors appeared in Abraham's tent, confirming that Sarah would give birth within a year. Sarah, listening to the conversation, also laughed in disbelief. God then asked, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is there anything impossible for the Lord?" Genesis 18:13-14. This moment brought not only hope, but also the need to renew confidence in the impossible. The promise of a legitimate heir was about to be fulfilled, but not without final challenges. When Isaac was born, Sarah was filled with joy and gratitude, but the tension with Hagar and Ishmael did not disappear. Over time, Ishmael began to mock Isaac, and this caused Sarah to feel that Hagar and Ishmael's presence in her home was no longer tolerable. She asked Abraham to send them away, saying, "The slave girl and her son will not inherit with my son Isaac." Genesis 21:10. Abraham was deeply distressed, as Ishmael was also his son, but God assured him that he would take care of Ishmael and that Abraham should grant Sarah's request. God stated that Ishmael would also become a great nation, but the focus was on Isaac, the son of promise. Abraham then, with a heavy heart, gave Hagar and Ishmael provisions and sent them away. Hagar and Ishmael wandered in the desert of Beersheba on the verge of death from lack of water. When Hagar despaired, God appeared and promised her that Ishmael would be the father of a great nation. God opened his eyes to a well of water, and salvation arrived. More years passed, and Abraham continued to walk by faith, but God was about to take him to an unprecedented test of confidence. he received a command from God that defied everything he had learned. Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer it there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you. Genesis 22:2. The order was incomprehensible. How could Abraham sacrifice the promised son, the one through whom all nations would be blessed? But moved by faith, Abraham did not question. He got up early, took Isaac, 2 servants, and the materials for the sacrifice, and set out for Moriah. During the journey, Isaac, not knowing what was happening, asked, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Genesis 22:7. Abraham replied, "God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." Genesis 22:8. Abraham's heart was full of conflict, but his trust in God was unshakable. He arrived at the mountain and prepared everything, ready to sacrifice his son, but tension was in the air. What would happen now? Abraham's faith would be rewarded, but God's answer was yet to come. The scene was tense. Abraham had built the altar, tied Isaac on it, and raised the knife, about to sacrifice the son of promise. The silence was profound, interrupted only by the sound of the wind and Abraham's own heart, which was beating fast. Then, at the last moment, a powerful voice echoed from heaven. "Abraham, Abraham." Genesis 22:11. Abraham stopped, his heart racing, and replied, "Here I am." God, in his mercy, said, "Do not lay down your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son." Genesis 22:12. Abraham looked around, and then, to his relief and surprise, he saw a ram caught by its horns in a bush. God had provided the sacrifice. Abraham offered the ram in Isaac's place, and there in Moriah he built an altar to the Lord, calling it "The Lord Will Provide." Genesis 22:14. This event not only strengthened Abraham's faith, but also cemented God's promise, showing that God would always provide. He and Isaac returned home, now more confident than ever in God's power. After the test of faith in Moriah, Abraham's life continued, but the echo of that experience would never fade. The trust he had shown in God was decisive, but over time, new difficulties began to arise. The aging of Abraham and Sarah became more visible, and with it, the feeling that time was against them. The promise still seemed distant, although God had reaffirmed that Isaac would be the key to the lineage that would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. At a crucial moment, God once again spoke to Abraham, telling him that his descendants would spread among many nations. However, Abraham's spirit was marked by the loss of Sarah, who died in Hebron. With the pain of loss, Abraham looked for a worthy place to bury her and bought the cave of Machpelah, a place that would later become the tomb of his entire family. This loss of Sarah marked the end of an era and brought Abraham face to face with the reality that he was now the patriarch of a promising but challenging lineage. The pressure to secure Isaac's future and his promise grew every day. Sarah's death was a watershed in Abraham's life. The patriarch, already elderly, needed to guarantee the future of his lineage. Isaac, now an adult, had no wife, and without a marriage, the fulfillment of God's promise would be at risk. Abraham knew he needed to act quickly to preserve the covenant he made with God. He summoned his most faithful servant, Eliezer, and charged him with a fundamental mission: finding a wife for Isaac, but with a special condition. "You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell." Genesis 24:3. Eliezer was to go to Abraham's homeland in Mesopotamia to seek a wife among his relatives. The obedient servant prepared himself for the long journey, but before leaving, Abraham gave him an enigmatic instruction: "The Lord, before whom I walked, will send his angel with you." Genesis 24:7. Eliezer's journey was long and full of challenges, but he trusted God completely. When he arrived at the well of Nahor in Haran, Eleazar said a specific prayer, asking God to show him which woman would be Isaac's wife. This moment of decision and trust in God would create the key to the next chapter in the story of Abraham and his descendants. The tension was at its height when Eleazar, after the long journey, arrived in Haran and prayed, asking God to guide him in the search for a wife for Isaac. He prayed a simple prayer, but full of faith. Lord God of my master Abraham, if you prosper my way, behold, I'm here at the spring of water, and the girl to whom I say, give me a little water from your pitcher, and she says to me, drink, and I will also give your camels water to drink. Be the woman you prepared for your day. Servant Isaac, Genesis 24:42-44. Shortly after the prayer, a young woman named Rebekah appeared. And when Eleazar made the request, she not only offered him water, but also prepared to give the camels water, fulfilling the prayer exactly as he had asked. Eleazar, clearly seeing God's hand in her journey, immediately blessed her and asked to know which family she was from. Rebekah revealed herself to be from the family of Nahor, Abraham's nephew, and Eleazar. Certain that God had guided his steps, asked permission to take Rebekah back with him. This moment was the culmination of the entire journey of faith and trust, demonstrating that God was preparing the way for the fulfillment of the promise. The tension was about to be resolved, and a new alliance was being formed. The great moment came when Eleazar returned to Canaan with Rebekah, and she met Isaac for the first time. Upon seeing her, Isaac recognized her as the wife God had provided. Rebekah got off her camel, covered her face and stood before him, and Isaac accepted her as his wife, taking her to the tent of his mother, Sarah, where he found solace and comfort. For the first time since his mother's death, Isaac and Rebekah got married, and through this bond, the promise made to Abraham began to come true. It was the most fulfilling moment of Abraham's entire journey of faith, as he had been tested, but could now see the future of his lineage being assured by God. Isaac, the son of promise, had married Rebekah, and the promise of becoming a great nation was approaching. Abraham, with his days already numbered, could finally rest knowing that his legacy was guaranteed. The climax of the story not only fulfilled God's promise, but also revealed how he always provides, how he directs the steps of those who have faith, even when circumstances seem impossible. Abraham's faith and obedience to God resulted in a glorious outcome. The story of Abraham is a testimony of faith, trust, and obedience. He began his journey with God by leaving his homeland, not knowing exactly where he was going, but with the certainty that God would guide him. Over the years, Abraham faced immense challenges, moments of doubt, and even extreme tests of faith, such as the request to sacrifice his son Isaac. Yet at every turn, God demonstrated his faithfulness by providing a solution when all seemed lost. Isaac's sacrifice on Mount Moriah, God's renewed promise, and the search for a wife for Isaac in Haran were all part of God's plan to establish a great nation from Abraham. He did not see the full fruits of his faith while he lived, but through his legacy, the fulfillment of the promise unfolded. Abraham is known as the father of faith because throughout his life, he demonstrated unwavering trust in God, trusting in God's promises even when circumstances seemed impossible. His story still inspires those today who in moments of uncertainty seek to follow God's will with confidence. Did you like this journey of Abraham's faith and sacrifice? Subscribe to the channel for more stories of confidence and overcoming, and don't miss our next video about the incredible lessons we can learn from life's challenges.